KSCO News Talk time, 10:06. Let's head on over to the Saturday special on KSCO.
Josh Stevens.
MZ, Michael Zwerling.
Hi, Josh Stevens. Is Dave Michaels there?
One more time.
Is Dave Michaels there?
I'm actually not too sure about that.
All right, we'll
Is Dave
promo.
Michaels there?
Yes, I'm right here, MZ.
Oh, Dave Michaels. Hi, Dave Michaels. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, MZ. How about yourself?
Great.
Is it beautiful up there where you are?
It's beautiful up here where I am, but it's getting too hot already.
Is it really? Well, yesterday was really, really hot out there. Today it's supposed to be a little bit cooler, but still absolutely beautiful weather, MZ. It is a beautiful time of year.
And it's a wonderful time for people to come and improve their health with thou. Right?
Sure, and as you know, MZ, and anybody who's listened to Dr. Wallach knows, the healthy immune system begins in the digestive system. That's what Dr. Wallach talks about all the time, is your ability to absorb that which you eat. So let me just remind people that we have various Healthy Start Packs. They all begin, though, with the Healthy Start Pack. That's the Tangy Tangerine, OsteoFX, and EFAs. Now, what you do to get the blood sugar pack, the digestion pack, the bone and joint pack, the heart and brain pack, you just add other things. So if you want the digestion pack, then what you want to do is you want to order the Healthy Start Pack along with Flora FX and enzymes that will make sure that your body can absorb what you eat, MZ, because you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb. That's the key.
Now, that is worth passing along, which you have just done.
And not passing away, just passing along.
All right. Okay, you'll be there till 2 o'clock today.
Till 2 o'clock.
Maybe you'll do another promo next hour to remind people.
I'll be here.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank you, Dave Michaels. Now, Josh Stevens, may I ask you a personal question?
Fire away.
Do you believe that discrimination is ever warranted?
Well, that's funny you ask that, because today, absolutely. I say that, why you might ask, because of the fact that on my way over here, driving just got put onto from easy to moderate mode, probably erring on the hard side. Why?
Yeah.
Because it's hot. Everyone's going back into town, as I just mentioned, 17 screwed, so it's just like, wait a minute, this is weekend traffic rearing its ugly head again. So
that's exactly right.
On top of that, I'm seeing all these Bay Area plates, and it's just like, what the heck? Dare I say it, all the non-essentials are back in town, and we need to shut down the beaches again and tell them, Valley, go home. So yes, sometimes discrimination is necessary.
Okay.
What say you?
That's going to be, well, I don't think it ever is, to be honest with you. I don't think it's ever justified. But that's just me, and I think it's also just most of the uber intelligent audience of KSCO. Now, I could be wrong. We'll find that out, because that's going to be the topic of most of our program today on the Saturday special, which we will begin right now.
Good morning. A brighter day is here. Good morning. May we bring you cheer.
We've got time, we've got tunes, we've got time, tunes, and temperature.
Get up and go, it's today, you know, on KSCO Radio.
And I want to thank Tucker Carlson of Fox News Channel for giving me the idea for today's topic and guest. Thank you, Tucker. Now, you didn't personally give it to me, but I happened to be watching your program yesterday, and I saw a gentleman for whom I have always had very high regard, hadn't heard about him or from him in years, but that gave me the idea.
Good morning. Now stay right here on KSCO Radio.
Back in the 1990s, we had a local talk show host here on KSCO named Rob Roberts, who was bold, and he was black, and he was conservative. And one of the guests that one of Rob's favorite guests back in those days was a then member of the University of California Board of Regents. His name is Ward Connerly, and Ward Connerly has been a big advocate for non-discrimination of any, not even reverse discrimination, right? And Ward Connerly, back in the 90s, was primarily responsible for getting a California constitutional amendment passed. I think it was called Prop 209, which prohibited any kind of discrimination on the part of universities and colleges and government agencies and so forth in the state of California. Now, I hope I'm getting this right, because I'm going to have egg on my face if I. You know what? I'm just going to pipe down and just say that I was delighted when I was watching Tucker Carlson yesterday to see Ward Connerly still going strong. Haven't heard from him for a few years. I heard about him. He was in the news a lot back in the 90s, but not so much in recent years. And I think it's because he retired and went to Idaho, I think. And so I was able to do a little research and reach out and snag Ward Connerly himself to be a guest here on the Saturday Special. Hey, Ward, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. You haven't screwed up much in your description.
That means a little bit. So set the record straight, please.
Yeah, no, you were pretty much on target. I was serving a 12-year, what I affectionately call a sentence, on the Board of Regents when I was on your program, on your station years ago. I did relocate to Idaho, to Coeur d'Alene, because I felt that California had become kind of loony, and I wanted a quieter place that had people who really believed in liberty. And I found it there, and I love it, and I won't say I will never return, because I do love it. But that's the circumstance of my arrival on your program and my return to California to fight the fight to defend what was Proposition 209, which is 37 words now transfixed into the California Constitution. And the real loonies are trying to take it away, and I just don't think that's good, and I'm going to fight it.
Well, thank God. One of the things that you said on your visit with Tucker Carlson yesterday was that your side, I'm going to say our side, I'm going to proudly say, because I'm 100% with you, and I think most of the KSCO audience is 100% with you, is not particularly well funded, and the other side that is trying to reverse or remove or overturn that constitutional amendment from Prop 209 is not particularly well funded, but the other side is, excuse me, because some Silicon Valley billionaires have put up money. And one of the things you said yesterday was that you didn't believe that those people realized what they were putting up money to support. And if they did realize, maybe the implication was maybe they wouldn't have. Would you explain that a little bit? I mean, did I get that right at least?
Well, politics is a process, a game, if you will, in which people operate by the premise, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And it just so happens in California that we have a paradigm of identity politics that is being played. And in our state, we have a political party that has a monopoly on votes. They have a machine. They have a political machine, many of whom are very well financed. They have been successful through the system of merit and made the right decisions, and they have a lot of cash. And that machine has been put to work to try to restore race preferences, i.e. race-based affirmative action, in the state of California. And the thing that you see dramatically in this state with this Proposition 16 is that there are probably less than 60 donors to pass this yes on 16, and there are literally thousands of donors for the no on 16. The only problem is that the no on 16, their thousands are in the category of $50 to $100. The yes on 16, two of them are billionaires with a B. One of them is the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings.
Who is a Santa Cruz resident. I don't know if he listens to KSCO, but he is a Santa Cruz. Pardon me?
I said he should be.
Well, we'll invite him. I actually had an email exchange with Reed Hastings several years back. I wanted him to be a guest on this program, and he was very kind and replied to my email, didn't ignore it or anything like that. Said, "Look, these are not. This isn't the best timing for me because back then they had a significant increase in the monthly fees or monthly subscription fees, and he was dealing with that whole thing. And I guess he came out pretty well, actually, because I don't think he was a billionaire back then, but whatever. In any case, so you know that Reed Hastings has personally given more than $1 million to the yes on Prop 16, which will be on the November 3rd California ballot. Yes?
Well, if he hasn't given it, somebody's lying about it and has filed a fraudulent campaign finance form, which I doubt, and he has not disputed it, and it's been out in the public domain now and on the forms, which he's had to sign for over 30 days, and the other person has donated $1.5 million through his C4 Foundation, and so they have just those two, 2,500,000.
What is that person's name? The second person?
I think his name is Quinn Daly. He's based in Oakland.
Okay, another high tech person.
No, he's a real estate developer.
I see. Okay.
And
well, look, there are different. There are multiple, at least two sides, maybe more, to every story, and maybe we'll get some callers today who will give us. Nothing makes sense to me that would justify discrimination or dropping Prop 209, which has been in a part of the California Constitution since when? When did it pass, Ward?
1996. It's probably one of the most simple passages in our Constitution. The language is, quote, the state, that's a small s, which means all government agencies in California, the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting, period. End of quote. And it's that 37 words that governs and drives how we interact with our government in this state, at least it's supposed to be, including the University of California, state colleges, community colleges, mosquito abatement district. All government agencies are supposed to treat people equally. And there might be instances in which you do discriminate against people, not on the basis of race and so on. But if you are in the fire department and you want to apply some standards of weight going in and out of a window, yeah, that's a form of discrimination. But anybody can reach that. Anybody can reach that standard. And what 209 is saying is that we all are required to pay our dues to the government, and as a result, the government should treat us as equals when it comes to getting a job or applying to college or bidding on a contract, which really ought to be the lowest responsible bid anyway. So 209 sought to establish a framework, a moral framework, but a practical framework for how we treat ourselves in this state, as we have now become what some call a majority-minority state, the most diverse population on the planet.
Well, back in the 90s, this program used to do its best to get competent and articulate spokespersons to appear, from both or all sides of a controversial topic.
Like who?
To appear, and I would be, what did you say?
Like who?
There were always people who I don't. Josh Stevens, what a terrible thing to do to the host is put him on the spot like that, especially when he's getting old and feeble and can't remember things, But that's okay. I still love you, and I'll try to think of something. But yeah, it was long before your time at KSCO that we used to have Saturday specials that presented a controversial topic facing the community or the state or the country, and we would have competent and articulate spokespersons representing both or all sides of that issue. It became very, very difficult, and it got more difficult every week, it seemed. I don't know why. People became chicken bleep, People didn't want to appear with the other side. And so now we don't even try very hard. We just encourage people, if they hear something with which they disagree, to call the program, which we, of course, will do during this program. I would love for somebody who disagrees with what Ward Connerly says and disagrees with what I believe, which happens to be the same thing. There is never a place for race-based discrimination anywhere, ever, okay? Ward, why are the people so... Why is the left, I guess, I don't like to use labels, but it is the left, why are they so bold suddenly to want to drop that part of the Constitution that was voted in by the people 24 years ago? Why?
I would answer you this way. After 209 passed, a number of people convinced me that this issue was critical to the future of our country. I accepted their perspective, and I shared it, and I went on what amounts to a national tour to try to get more states to embrace the language of 209. We succeeded in doing that, and I think the last count was 9 states. The second state following California was the state of Washington. That was in 1998. Last year, the Washington legislature, which is largely composed of the same kind of political structure that we have in California, Democrats are dominant, have a supermajority, as we have in California, and they voted to strike the language of 209 from their books. It's not in the Constitution, but they voted to get rid of 209. Every Democrat there is in that legislature voted in favor of getting rid of that language. There was a group that formed after this happened of citizens. They contacted me, I was in Idaho at the time, and said, would you advise us as a volunteer? We know that you're next door. And so I agreed to do so. But I thought, well, maybe this is just an aberration here, that all Democrats are against equality for everybody. Maybe there's some other reason involved, but the fact remains that all Democrats voted in favor of getting rid of the language. And we overturned that, by the way. The citizens did. They overturned it, and I was honored to be by their side in doing that. Earlier this year, as a resident of Idaho, I thought, well, I'm a resident here, and what kind of structure do I want for the little ones who follow me, who don't happen to look like me, but they share my desire for a good life, pursue their happiness. So I prevailed upon the Idaho legislature to include those words, those 37 words, in the laws of Idaho. They agreed. Every Republican voted in favor of the language, except one, I believe. Every Democrat voted against it. So now you have two states where all Democrats mostly are voting against it. All Republicans are voting in favor of it. Then I get a call one day from my friend, former Governor Pete Wilson, and he said, 209's in trouble. And I said, well, I understand that. He said, you really need to come back. If you can, we need you here. So I thought about it, and I thought, I'm going to pine away, but I'm not going to pine away in a casket. I'm going to do my duty as a citizen. So I made arrangements to relocate back to California, and that's when I came head-to-head with the third dynamics, the dynamics of a third state, California, where all Democrats once again voted to get rid of that language of equality. So I've come to the conclusion that this is no longer an issue of moral conviction. If you're my age, 81, and you lived through the 1960s, you fondly remember Democrats like Lyndon Johnson and Hubert Humphrey and John F. Kennedy and countless others who believed in getting rid of Jim Crow and oppressive laws and granting equal citizenship to the Negro, to people who were categorized as minorities. Well, I think we came away from that period having passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, in which we felt that our job was done to remove the oppressive conditions on black people, but we did not get the lesson that we should have gotten, which is, in this country, every person is entitled to equal treatment under the law. Doesn't matter whether you're black or brown or purple or Martian or whatever. Every person is entitled to equal treatment under the law. And we didn't quite debate it that way in the 60s, and we didn't come away with that lesson. And now you have Democrat Party, God bless them, Democrat Party is constructed around identities. The California legislature has a bunch of caucuses, and the Latino caucus and the Black caucus in the California legislature have wanted to get rid of 209 from the day that it passed.
Why?
And now they have the votes to do it.
Yeah, why?
So you believe that you're doing the Lord's work frankly, you think that that's the moral thing to do. We want to help minorities. We want to, I'm saying they, we by them, they, I'm not a Democrat. But they feel that that's being on the side of the angels. That's the moral position to take. The only problem with their reasoning is that sometimes when you do that, in the interest of helping people, you hurt them. And that's what I think is being done to black people. There is a rebranding going on right now among black people. A lot of young people are saying, we don't like being viewed as helpless and the minority, the poor person who needs the hand on the scale in order for us to compete. Those people are coming forward, Terrence Williams and Candace Owens and the Hodge brothers, and those people are saying, let's change this paradigm. And Democrats are so wedded to it that they don't hear the message. They're just floating around out there, living in the past, thinking they're doing the right thing. And also you have this factor. You have this new majority of Americans of largely Mexican descent, we use the term Latino, I guess, who want to make sure that, as one of them said to me, my people are reflecting the population of California. The majority population, they believe there should be the majority, if not majority, at least a representative relationship of people at the University of California and in the public sector, jobs in the public sector, and contracts.
To the exclusion of others. That's what I'm getting out of this.
I won't say to the exclusion of others, but with preference. They're saying, as one of them said to me, a former speaker, Ward, your people, which I hate being characterized that way, or characterizing others, but he said, your people got ahead with affirmative action. Now it's our turn. And therein, I think, is the best explanation of what's going on right now.
Reparations. Is that the word?
Well, it's more than a coincidence that the bill to put 209 back on the ballot was passed by the legislature on June 15th, my birthday. On June 16th, the same author that carried the bill to put Prop 16 on the ballot carried a bill to study reparations for the descendants of slavery. That was on June 16th. It is not a coincidence that the same person, the chair of the legislative black caucus in the California legislature, carried both bills. Both bills are supported by a new group called American Descendants of Slavery. And all of this is on the public record, so I'm not fictionalizing what is occurring here. There's an agenda that's out there, and the stars are lining up for them to get it through. You had a man murdered with a cop putting a knee on that man's throat for almost 9 minutes, which allowed them to leverage that incident to get this thing on the ballot. Had that not happened, there might have been a few recalcitrant Democrats who would have privately said, no, I don't want this to happen. I don't have to run on this for re-election. But with that George Floyd incident hanging out there, they were able to argue that there is systemic racism in the country, and here's how we should deal with systemic racism. Forgive me for waxing on this long like this, but I'm trying to give your audience.
I'm very happy you're doing that. Thank you. So no forgiving No forgiving necessary. Please, thank you is necessary.
Well, I think that should frame for you what is at play here. And my reaction to all of that is that if there were racism, systemic or otherwise, I would be one of the first to run in and say, let's deal with this. Let's do something about it. But I honestly don't believe that we have racism in the state of California, certainly. I don't think that it's in the nation of a systemic nation. The word systemic means that our structure, our laws, and everything else are racist. They're not. But it so happens in this era where if you say something like that, they want to send a mob out to get you and to shut you down if they can. And fortunately for 209, I'm not that easily shut down. And I believe so fervently in the principle of equal treatment, of equality, that until my last breath is taken, I will be yelling equality. I was born in the Deep South, Leesville, Louisiana, in 1939. And I will never forget on my birth certificate there is a C. And C does not mean that I'm in the C column of the baby ward, maternity ward. It means that I was colored. And that designation would track the path of my life in the South from the day that I was born until we eventually ended Jim Crow. And colored people were denied right to vote, were denied to marry according to their own wishes. There had to be somebody that was in, quote, your race, couldn't go to certain restaurants. When my friends and I would go to a movie, there were certain sections that you could sit in. All of those things were determined based on the color of my skin. And that I just felt from the day that I had any awareness of at all, that this isn't right. This just isn't right. And there was another guy who believed the same way, and his name was Martin Luther King Jr. And he went around the country telling people about the American creed. And he said that someday this nation would have to live out the true meaning of its creed. And that creed is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I live by those words. I live by those words. And I was inspired by those words, which were uttered also by the Abe Lincoln, who said, we are a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So there is a clear trail from the founding of this country through the 1980s and 90s, the 19th century, 20th century, of our dedication to equality. Yes, we were treating people wrongly in those days when I was coming up, but to our everlasting credit, we got the message of what the American creed is, and we sought to change it, and we indeed did change it. But now we're backtracking, and we're looking at disparities and saying that, well, there are disparities, and equality is not providing equal opportunity for everybody, and we need to get rid of these impediments on government's ability to provide opportunities to people. The Yes on 16 side has the slogan, opportunities for all. And the label that we're stuck with on the ballot says Proposition 16 will allow diversity. Nowhere in the language is the word diversity mentioned. Nowhere. So they're going to employ the oldest trick in American politics right now, which is to redefine the problem. and to make the voters think they're voting for one thing when in fact they're voting for another. The choice
in
that
this,
we have,
in this case, the opposite of what they think they're voting for.
the opposite,
Yeah.
the opposite. And the choice that we have is, do we still want a merit-based system in which people compete and we go according to the one, regardless of their race or sex, who is the most competitive? Or do we want the government, roughly 2,000 agencies or so in the state of California, to make these decisions based on how we were born? For me, that's a clear-cut decision.
Oh, my. We're talking with Ward Connerly about the prospect of dropping Prop 209, passed in 1996, became part of the California Constitution way back then. Thinking back quite a number of years, Ward, it makes sense that affirmative action is not a term that you've heard too much about probably since then. And probably for that reason, that it's been unconstitutional for there to be any kind of discrimination. Now they want it to be constitutional for there to be certain reasons to allow for discrimination in certain instances, right? I mean, that's what Prop 16 on the upcoming November 3rd California election is all about.
I believe that our growth as a people, as a state, have rendered that term affirmative action and the policy that underlies it to be irrelevant in this state. We don't need affirmative action based on race. It's interesting that when the term was first used, it was used by President John F. Kennedy, who used in his executive order to facilitate the entry of black people into the mainstream of America. The language was, you will take, and this was to federal contractors and others doing business with the federal government, you will take affirmative action to ensure that people are treated, quote, without regard to race, religion, color, and so on. Without regard to. After he was assassinated in 1960, he was assassinated in 63. 2 years later, Dr. King had prevailed upon his successor, Lyndon Baines Johnson, to take steps that were more definite, to not only have a goal here, but let's get some results. We need to get black people into the mainstream of American life, and we need results. And so Johnson issued an executive order 11246 that used the term affirmative action, but he wanted results. He mentions results. And he made the speech that you don't take people who have been hobbled by chains and bring them to the starting line of a race and tell them to run the race and think that you have been just and fair. So affirmative action took a dramatic turn there from non-discrimination without regard to race to an aggressive program commanding the recipients of federal dollars to use race, to look at race, and conducting themselves to try to get parity in the population. If California has X percent of these and 12% and Y percent of those, then they are to measure that. Each contractor and agency is required to measure that. And that has set into place a mindset which says that we have to address the disparities, but in the process of addressing the disparities, we end up doing the very thing that the law forbids us from doing.
So that's why it was necessary for you to come up with the 37 words of Prop 209 back in 1996.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we had used just the word discrimination, there wouldn't have been any problem with the opposition. It's the preferential treatment that they don't like, because when you have different standards for people based on race, that is a preference. They call it, no, we're just trying to achieve diversity.
Whoa. Okay, I think we're going to open the phone lines. We're talking with Ward Connerly, who is very passionate about non-race-based discrimination remaining the law in California and all over the country. And there is a significant possibility that will change. That is the status of the law today in California, going back 24 years to the passage of Prop 209 that Mr. Connerly was very active in helping to get passed back in 1996. But there is a Proposition 16 on the upcoming November 3rd ballot here in California that would reverse that would remove that from the Constitution and effectively allow discrimination. I just can't believe this. Anyhow, give us a call at 479-1080 if you want to participate in the conversation here on the KSCO Saturday Special on your favorite radio station. Our special guest today is Ward Connerly, and let's take our first call, and that will be Jerome, spelled Gerome. Hi, Jerome.
Hi, but my name's spelled Jerome.
That's what I thought, but I have to poke fun at our board op, Josh, who's got his own way of spelling things. I've never seen Jerome spelled Gerome. But you are in Castroville, right?
Yes, they usually spell it Jeremy.
Okay.
Pronounce it Jeremy instead of Jerome, but Jerome's fine.
Well, thanks for calling in, and talk to Ward Connerly.
Well,
Hi, Jerome.
Part of what I wanted to talk to you about was the election that is coming up. With the election, you remember back in the 90s, we voted, in fact, I think it was in the 80s, to have English as a language here in California. And a majority of the people, I think it was 87% or something of the people voted yes, that's what we wanted. And our judges here in the state, wonderful state, overturned it and said it's unconstitutional, said you can't do that. Well, why did they put it on the ballot then? And they just control whatever they want to do. Right now, our whole state is in severe trouble because of it being a sanctuary state. We aren't only a sanctuary city, but we are a sanctuary state because of our governors and everybody that's here. But because of that, they've just messed up our whole police system. Nothing is, I'm scared to death of my grandchildren. They go out and they're raped by somebody or they're kidnapped by somebody. How are we going to know who they are? Nobody has any idea who people are here anyway. But also with the election back in 1990, I don't know if you remember George Waldron from there.
Oh, do I ever? Oh, yeah. He was great. Yeah, and his daughters are still in the area, as far as I know.
Yes, and then probably his wife's probably passed away by now. But he opened my eyes to the political system in Santa Cruz County and all over Monterey County. When I ran for governor, I thought everything was on the up and up, and he says, just watch. He tried to get in there so he could check the machines. He had a person that was competent and shown that he was able to check the voting machines the night before the election. And they said, okay, fine. And they put him and this gentleman outside and then waited until it was too late and wouldn't let him in there to run the election.
Okay, Jerome, I want to do our best to stick to the topic today if we can. And I think I remember you. Because you said you ran for governor. What's your last name?
McCready.
Okay, for golly. I thought you moved to heaven some years ago, but I'm happy to hear that you clearly have not. So
trust me, I will go to heaven, but it won't be till I'm such a pain in the butt for everybody in California.
Okay, great. So listen. What is your contribution today to the topic at hand, which is Is discrimination based on race ever justified or permissible, or should it be?
No, it shouldn't have been when they did it back in the earlier years. When they put them up there, they made discrimination part of the affirmative action programs that were put in. And
okay, so you're totally with with Ward Connerly on this whole topic, right?
Yes, but I'm just saying to you, Michael, our political system is not going to allow that to happen. What I want to see happen is somebody get on the ball here and check and see how the Democrats are going to steal this election, this coming election, by stealing votes and by sending ballots to people who cannot vote.
Okay.
And we need to check on that. That's what's going to happen.
Oh, okay, for sure. That's a whole different topic for a different Saturday special. Anyhow, Jerome, it's nice to hear you're still with us and you're still, totally with it. And thanks for calling 479-1080. Here's Colonel Terry. It says affirmative action is ruined.
Is what?
Ruined is what it says on the board here. Is that correct? Is that what your message is?
I observed it from working at the White House, the Pentagon, and all over Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in the country, in government and in corporate America. I'm a liberal, progressive. My father integrated a plant in Shawnee, Oklahoma, offering blacks equal job opportunities in 1956, and our house was threatened by the Ku Klux Klan in Shawnee, Oklahoma because of it. And enough said there. I have no racial prejudices, but what I have is a prejudice against incompetent government and people abusing government opportunities in a way that's negative. The other thing I've seen in Washington, I saw so much abuse of affirmative action in the 80s and 70s in Washington, with incompetent people being promoted and then doing terribly wasteful things. I've also experienced the abuse of incompetent medical doctors who got their medical licenses from the corrupt Washington, D.C. medical establishment that Marion Barry put in place in Washington, D.C. Plain and simple, and I'm sure Mr. Connolly can agree with me that that's occurred. Honest, honorable black people I know, and I have some great friends who are African Americans descendants, want equal opportunity, and they are embarrassed at blacks and Hispanics given jobs they're not qualified for because of their race. It is so abused horribly. I've seen incompetent black doctors murder, kill people incompetently. That's how bad it can get. Where do you draw the line? It's called equal opportunity. That we should have, no question about it. And that's what was intended in the civil rights legislation of the 60s. And the equal employment legislation. I'm sure Mr. Connolly would agree with me. And we need a political leadership that will promote equal means equal. And we need, again, responsible black leaders coming forward to say, I worked for an Air Force 4-star general who was black, and he would say to cadets when he talked to them, if you think you need affirmative opportunity to get a heads up, I don't want you in my Air Force. I want you to earn it like I did. So there we are.
Thank you, Colonel Terry. Appreciate your calling 479-1080. Here's Walt and Ben Lomond on affirmative action. Go ahead, Ward. Walt. Excuse me.
Yes, what I wanted to say is I graduated from high school in 1966, and I was working for a plumber for a couple of years, and in 1967, I went down to L.A. I was living in L.A., and tried to apply for a union job, get in as an apprentice. So when I went up to the counter, he said, basically, you're white, we can't hire you, and we can't find any blacks that will work. So we're stuck. So you're going to have to go someplace else to find a job because we can't hire you. And through most of my working life, I've encountered those kind of situations, and I decided to look up the Civil Rights Act. They had, I think there's two of them, 64 and 65, and it actually says in there, no quotas.
Well, he got rung. Wait a minute. Oh, that's you, Ward. I guess someone's calling you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's take our next caller. We lost the last caller. Next caller is Tony in Live Oak. Hey, let's see if we can stick to the topic, you guys. We've all got horrible, nightmarish affirmative action type stories, including myself. We're not talking about that. What I'm interested in is, has anybody even heard of the movement to to reverse the prohibition against race-based discrimination for anything in California? That's sort of a big thing that we should be talking about and understanding could happen within 90 days.
Yep. Hello.
Yeah, who is that? You, Tony?
Yes, that's me.
Try to stick to the topic, because people are getting off the topic without realizing it.
Thank you for defining it. Now, I'm older than Ward is, but I'm amazed that you're getting quality people like this talking. And you're right. I did not know anything about this issue, so I'm indebted to you to bring it out. So everyone who's listening is probably learning something, because I thought I was pretty hip to what's going on. I knew nothing about it. But I'm 3 years older than Ward, and I lived in Detroit when there was lots of discrimination, and my uncle was a policeman, and he said there was a black man killed every single day in Detroit when I was 75 years ago, when I was 10 years old, and no one did any investigation, and you never read about it in the newspaper. So I run the gamut from the civil rights problem from beginning to end, basically. But I want to congratulate Mr. Ward here for I see Ward Connerly.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm amazed by the amount of information he's been able to give us, and I feel like I've been totally educated on it. I want to say that your previous program had another great speaker, and he and Mr. Olson were talking about do no harm. And I was just wondering if there's another facet that Mr. Connerly could fasten onto. It's a very simple concept. Everything they're doing in government now, it has impact all races apparently, but Gail from the health department is doing harm, and she could be sued for malpractice.
Okay, Tony, we're getting off the subject.
I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to listen gratefully for everything he has to say. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Tony. You're a great caller, but it's sort of hard to stick to the topic, but let's do it. Okay. We've got 25 seconds left in this hour. Jacques, Mary, and please stay tuned. We will get to you just on the other side of the break.
Great program.
You are listening to KSCO Santa Cruz.
By nearly 30 minutes. Report of fire, 101 at East Garrison. Non-injury traffic collision, 17 southbound at Paso Tiempo. And that's about it in terms of collisions. And as for Highway 101, you'll be seeing slowdowns in Morgan Hill, San Martin, Gilroy, down to San Juan Road, and just past the 156 interchange as well. Once you get past Prunedale, it will be smooth sailing in your southbound approach to Salinas. Looking at our local weather outside the KSCO studio, it's 77. Today we will be warming up to the 90s. We've got a red flag warning and heat advisory, with the former now until 9 p.m. and the red flag warning until tomorrow at 11. Now till tomorrow to 11. Tonight, expect temperatures to drop down to the mid-60s, and we should be getting cooler by Sunday. Expect highs in the mid-80s. Time now for the Saturday special. Let's begin hour 2 on AM 1080 KSCO.
Josh Stevens.
MZ, Michael Zwerling.
Pray tell, what is a red flag warning?
It means there is a hazard for fires because dry and hot and no humid.
Oh.
So don't light up a cigarette on the side of the road, people.
All right. Is Dave Michaels there for a Dave Cave promo?
He might be.
I'm right here, MZ.
Hi, Dave Michaels.
Hey, your interview is going great. Is he still on the line here?
He sure is.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well,
We're so lucky.
Let me make this real quick then, MZ. We still have a few canisters of Tangy Tangerine left. You know, the week before last we had a big sale. We sold a lot of stuff, but we do still have a few canisters of Tangy Tangerine. Tangy Tangerine, real quickly, is 87 of the 90 essential nutrients. 87 of the 90 essential nutrients come in this canister. If you're looking for all 90 essential nutrients, what you would add to this would be your EFAs. So your Tangy Tangerine and your EFAs, and you've got your 90 essential nutrients, MZ. It is that easy.
Essential fatty acids.
Essential fatty acids, your omega-3, 6, and 9, along with your 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids. All that stuff is in the Tangy Tangerine. Get your 90 essential nutrients. It'll make you feel a lot different, MZ.
Great. Thank you, Dave Michaels.
You got it.
Hey, let me ask you something. As the three-day a week host of Flight 1080, are you familiar with the "It's Just a Mask" video?
No.
Okay. Come about 11:30 today, we're going to switch topics, and I'm going to play the audio of that 11-minute video.
Okay.
That's on YouTube in a number of places.
All right.
And I'm going to pose the question, would only a nutcase pass on this 11-minute video? Right. So after we're finished playing it, there should be, 15 minutes or so left of the program. But between now and then, we're going to continue with Ward Connerly and talking about affirmative action. I've decided, Ward pointed out it's very healthy and healthful to let people, ventilate about their affirmative action stories.
Okay.
Ventilate with their affirmative action stories. Golly, I have one of my own, a big one, and so it could be very healing. Back when it was being talked about a lot, maybe the first five or so years of my ownership of KSCO, I thought that it was mischaracterized. Instead of calling it affirmative action, they should have called it negative action. That's what I always felt, but in any case.
All right, well, that sounds interesting. That'll be coming up at 11:30?
Yeah, well, no, the affirmative action we're going to continue right now.
Oh.
We're going to continue what we have already started during the last. As soon as I can find the, here. I keep trying to find our phone system. Okay, here it is, and we're going to continue back. But right now we have to start hour number 2, or it just won't feel right. The hour 2 jingle. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1.
Oh, hello, darling. I hate to hang up on you, but I'm sorry, baby, but I have to go. It's time for that wonderful record show. I'd love to visit, but you'll have to call back. KSCO has the inside track.
We will continue our discussion of Prop 16 with our special guest, Ward Connerly.
I'm sorry, baby, but I really gotta go to KSCO Radio. Bye.
And Ward, correct me if I'm wrong, Prop 16 on the upcoming November 3rd California ballot, which is also the presidential election, obviously, would restore race-based affirmative action in the state of California that has been illegal ever since the 1996 passage of Prop 209, which prohibited it.
That's right.
Okay.
It would grant every government agency in California the ability to use the factors of race and sex and color and national origin in their decision-making process.
Re-grant. Would that be correct to say? Because that was the practice that got you excited enough to go to work on getting Prop 209 passed back in 1996. which prohibited that. Anyhow, if you want to call 479-1080 and talk with Ward, please do so. If you want to email mz@ksco.com, please do so. Let's take our next caller, and that would be, who would that be? Oh, that would be Mary in Pasatiempo. Asks us about funding for Prop Mention. Okay, go ahead, Mary. You're on.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Connerly, I want to thank you for your work. I know it would probably hard to move back from beautiful Coeur d'Alene to California to the mess we have here. But what I wanted to speak to was, you mentioned the funding of Prop 16, which I am ignorant of as well. The Prop 16 measure, I believe, is a strategic action by the left to tie into the white guilt that they've pumped into the college kids. It's a identity politics tool, and it's very insidious. And I really am grateful for your being able to bring it to our attention, because really it seems like it's under the radar here, and we need to pay more attention. The funding coming from the billionaires is really telling, and I think that part of it could be more publicized, is that Victor Davis Hanson brings out constantly the fact that billionaires are running the state, and it would be good if the public knew more about it, and maybe some of us would put in a little bit more fight like you are.
Well, I second that motion, and Victor Davis Hanson is absolutely correct, because the political machine needs fuel, and that fuel is supplied by a handful of loyal people who have done well. And when one of the consultants calls them and says, "We need some money," they write out a big check, Mary, and that's where we are. It's really interesting. If you were to go to the finance forums of campaigns and elected officials and so on, you will see the reliable members of that political machine who number on the yes side, who number probably less than 70. You would also see on the no side about 2,000 or so, but are $50 to $100 donors, and only about $500,000 as compared to 3.7 million for the yes side. 3.7 million to about 500,000. Those are in the public records. And it's hard to get your message out under that kind of situation, especially when the Attorney General writes a ballot label which says Proposition 16 will allow diversity. Really difficult.
Yep. Mary, thanks for your call to 479-1080. Here's, thank you, John Ellis in Soquel. Hey, Professor John, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Good to be on with you.
I saw you with Mark Levin. Mark
on Life, Liberty, and Levin, yeah.
Not Mark. What the great one is? Anyhow, here you are, and I guess you and Ward are old buddies, huh?
I think so.
Yeah.
We've worked together.
Right. So you're calling in
I knew that.
To greet Ward, right. I've had John on the Saturday Special a number of times. John's written a book about brainwashing and of college students, that has been planned over the last 50 or so years, and it's been executed pretty effectively. So in any case, so you and Ward worked together when and for part of this affirmative action thing, or
over the 209 campaign.
Yes, well, 209 campaign. We were there together. I remember as you were making your victory speech I think I was right next to you. And then we've been doing things together over the years. I have to say, Ward, that I think this country has been very, very lucky over its 200 plus years history. In that when it needed a man to do a job, there he was. And I think it has been the United States has been very lucky. When it needed geniuses to write its Constitution, there they were. And I have to say that when it comes to fighting affirmative action, it needed Ward Connerly, and there he was. It was all part of America's good luck all over again.
That's awfully kind of you. I would add or substitute the fact that we now have a generation of young people of Chinese descent, Americans all, who really in some cases feel threatened by the return of preferences. But I think that overwhelmingly they're guided by the principle of equality. Some of the greatest Americans I have ever met are involved in the campaign to defeat Prop 16. They get it, John, and they're working feverishly, sometimes 16 hours a day on Twitter, trying to spread the message that 16 is bad, just bad law.
Yeah. I sort of had the hunch we're going to win this because I think the Asian American vote will be solidly going our way, don't you think?
I think so. I think that we can get 80% or more of the, quote, Asian American vote. I don't like that term.
Yeah, I know. It's from our side. It doesn't feel good to be counting ethnic votes, but unfortunately, that we're forced into it. But one thing that puzzled me a little bit, although maybe not too much, was the collapse in the assembly of the votes which we expected to go our way on this. I mean, I expected half a dozen assemblymen who were Asian American descent to vote our way, and all of a sudden that vote collapsed. And I think George Floyd's death was what did that. They were intimidated.
Yeah, I think that was it. That plus the white guilt. Once this became, once George Floyd's name was entered into the equation, the outcome was predetermined, and the speaker at that point began to put the strong arm on all members, and that strong arm extended to the University of California regents, which unanimously voted to endorse yes on 16. And to me, having served there, for all regents, all 18 of the appointed ones, to agree on something tells me that somebody was exerting some influence and moving them around to get them to that position. And I know who that was.
Mention some name.
Well, my first name would be a spouse of a famous politician.
Well, mention it. Go ahead, John.
No, but I think Richard Bloom probably. I think
Mr. Dianne Feinstein, huh?
Yeah, I think who's been a very negative influence on the Board of Regents for a very long time. But I think, Ward, you remember John Moores, your colleague, and when John Moores left the Board of Regents, he famously said, the regents are about as much use as furniture when it comes to governing the university. And I think he was right on that, although he wasn't when you were a regent, Ward. I mean, in fact, the regents passed a proto version of 209, a few years earlier? Was it 1995?
In July of 1995. I will never forget it.
I'll never forget it. I was there that day, and I spoke for your two propositions to outlaw racial preferences in the University of California. Now, 209, obviously, the prohibitions on use of race were wider, statewide, but those two propositions of yours were for the University of California. And there, the University of California Regents split. There was a narrow positive vote. Now, within a few years, I never saw any more splits. I mean, somehow the Regents began to lock up solidly on the other side.
Well, John, the dynamic that's involved is called party politics. And you have a situation in which one party is dominant. They have a monopoly. And the decision goes out that we want this passed. The speaker takes $53,800 out of his own campaign coffers and gives that to the Yes on 16 campaign. This became a party issue. And if you want to stay an active member of the leadership, you want to be a chair of X committee, I don't care whether you're of Chinese descent or not, you're first and foremost in their mind, you're a Democrat. And you're expected to hold the line of the Democrats. So at that point, our goose was cooked.
Yeah. And the trouble is that the present radical left of the Democratic Party uses race to advance radicalism. I don't think it does anything useful for minorities in doing so, but it does enhance its own power doing it.
You're right, but we can win this thing. If you look at the electoral map, if we can get 80% of the vote of Americans of Asian descent, black people are only 6% of California, and we would, although I would hate to concede any vote to anybody, but even if we lost every one of them, if we can get 75 to 80% of whites who, if they have a brain that's functioning, will realize, those that are still left in California, that under this new regime, they're going to be screwed. And if we can get 70% of that vote, which can come in the form of parent-teachers association types and veterans, all of which have membership that are typically white, we can win this thing. And I don't see the vote of Latinos either. I mean, you find a strong strain of independence that the elites don't, in the Democrat Party, the Latino caucus, I don't think that they're reading this right about the Latino population. I think we can get a very good amount of them.
Yeah. I'm going to reverse myself. Excuse me, gentlemen. I'm going to reverse myself. I had announced earlier that come 11:30 we're going to do so. There's just too much interest in this particular topic to cut it off. And if Ward is available to continue even to the end of the program, which would be noontime, I think we should. It's the right thing to do to continue this topic because there are so many people. Jacques and Zach and Richard and Mont, all these people need to get on, and we will. We promise they will get on. Okay.
I'll stay with you.
Great. Okay. So, John, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were making another point here.
Well, I think that Proposition 209 is 24 years ago. And you can see that the University of California basically cheats a lot, a real lot. Abolishing the SATs is just a way of cheating on 209. And I think a lot of the unspoken rationale, if you talk to people in the corridors, it's, well, the public opinion has probably changed. 209 is out of date anyway. We're not really cheating what the public actually feels now. Now, if we win this thing, I think it'll be time to go back to the University of California and say it's about time that you listen to the voice of the public and stop cheating. Stop this obsession with the diversity. The public has said it doesn't want it. And I think it might be very healthy that we've had this vote if it goes the right way.
Well, I agree with you, John, in your line of thinking. The only problem is it presumes a certain level of awareness on the part of the electorate. And in a state such as ours, 40 million people, it's hard to get that to build that consensus.
We're within 90 days of the election now, well within, and there isn't all that much awareness.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Well, the one thing we could try to do is to, the pro this proposition vote is being sold on the idea that we need to do a favor to minorities. We need to, this is helpful to minorities. Now, what people on our side know is that this simply isn't true. It's very damaging to minorities to do this to them. My favorite way of looking at this is, imagine you're a parent, you have two children. You say to one of them, I'm going to hold you to the highest possible standards. I'm going to expect you to excel, and I'll judge you by the highest standards. And you say to the other one, oh, I don't expect so much of you. You'll be able to get by with a much lower level of effort and achievement. Now, any parent that did that ought to be convicted of child abuse, but that's what we're doing. And basically, if you tell people you expect less of them, that's what you're going to get. And that's very, very damaging to minorities to be told that. And there's been some work done on the amount of hours of study outside classroom done on college campuses, and the whole level of effort outside of class time is down. But where people used to spend 24 hours of study outside of class, now white students spend about 12. Black students spend about 10 hours. In other words, the message, we expect less of you, you don't have to work so hard, it's getting through. And it's damaging those kids.
John, if you would take just a few minutes and put this pen to paper or keyboard to whatever, and send it to Californians for Equal Rights. Californians for Equal Rights, I would appreciate it, because what you just said is right on target. I share that, but we're having to organize a couple thousand volunteers into a coherent message, and you've just given us that message.
Yes.
Well, good. I'm glad that might be some use, but it weighs on me terribly that we are telling kids not to work so hard, and because you don't need to. That's a dreadful thing to say to anybody. The human spirit is the thing we have going with us all the time, right? The determination to get somewhere. You see human beings presented with problems, they'll do their damnedest to overcome them. If you interfere with that spirit, that's terrible. And that's what we're doing with affirmative action.
John, hey, thank you very much for calling into the Saturday special today. Very much.
Okay, I will get off. I shouldn't take him. Good to be in touch with you again, Ward, and to hear your voice.
Take care. Our next caller is going to be Jacques in Santa Cruz. Jacques, you're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Connerly. First, let me say that you are one of the bravest men I've ever heard of. I am a retired college professor and an immigrant, and I watched you with great admiration when you eliminated, I think, single-handed racial preferments from admission to the University of California. Now, I also want to say we could use more advice. What can ordinary citizens do to stop the attempt to reintroduce racial preferences in admissions and in hiring. It's not completely clear to me. As I said, I'm a retired old guy. I've got time. I'm good with the computer, but I don't know exactly what to do. So we could use more advice.
Here's a template of what would help our campaign. Number one, entities such as Netflix need to know that they're not on the side of the angels in doing this. That is their persuasion at this point, and I think they're wrong, strongly wrong. So, number one, find out how you can intervene to let Netflix and others know that you really do favor the principle of equal treatment for every person.
Okay, that's easy to do.
We'll invite Reed Hastings to be on, maybe with you, Ward, maybe with you, Jock.
Okay, Netflix.
All right,
okay.
what else?
What else, Mr. Connerly?
Secondly, get active on social media, such as Twitter. I wasn't until about a year ago, and I went on, and I discovered a whole new world. In a democracy, there needs to be a way for the people to aggregate their views and to create a majority. That is the way to do it. And I have met, honestly, a couple of thousand people on Twitter, and we jointly exercise our right to tweet, and that's how the consensus is formed. We have less than 90 days to alert the people of California that they should not rely on the ballot label, which is allowing diversity, but rather understand what 16 really is. 16 is restoring the ability of government to discriminate by using different standards for races. People need to know that.
Finally, those who have read articles on this, including in the Wall Street Journal, know what this is all about. The question is, what do we do given the limitations of California? I'm on Facebook, but I don't get very often to talk to liberals or independents whose minds I could change on that.
Well, go on Twitter. Go on Twitter.
Okay, I'll try Twitter just for you. I'll try Twitter because I have unsurpassed admiration for you. You're the only man who could make me try Twitter.
I'm flattered. Write letters to the editor.
Yeah, we do that.
On this show, expressing your views on this show, that you can't imagine how fulfilling it is for someone who is pushing a political issue to know that the wind is at his back. And when I get on a program like this and I come away knowing that 80% or so of the people are behind me, it just gives me fuel to go the next week and to do as hard as I can. I'll do that anyway, but it really helps to know that you've got the support of people.
Well, I'm sure you have the support of KSCO listeners. The problem is that we're surrounded by Bolsheviks and Trotskyists, and it's not obvious how to reach them and say, look, this is a racist measure that's being reintroduced. It's not that easy. But I will follow your advice. I'll try Twitter, and I'll write Netflix, and I will have my friends.
I'll be your first follower.
Thank you, Jock. Okay, let's go
much.
to our next caller, Zach in Watsonville. Zach, you're on with Ward Connerly and poor old MZ.
Oh, yes. Hey, thank you, MZ, for hosting.
Hi, Zach.
An honor. Hi, it's an honor to speak with you, someone instrumental in getting rid of something that is racist.
Yeah.
But, so what I think is this. I'm not a board member of anything. I'm just an observer. I've been observing this affirmative action thing since I knew about it in middle school. And the question was raised, why would there even be a need for affirmative action? And people who are for it will tell you that there's a disparage of wealth and there's, things are unfair. And I say, okay, well, maybe that is the case, but dealing with it with giving in a lazy way. Giving people an excuse to go through the system without merit is wrong, and it should be wrong. It should, and I don't want to discredit anyone that's a product of affirmative action, but at the same time, I want to say the solution is from the ground up. We need to not throw money at the schools if they're underperforming, but we need to focus on the schools and realize why, maybe they need more time in school if they're not getting the test scores. Maybe they need, why aren't the teachers getting through to them? There's other ways to address it other than, throwing money at the schools for underperforming to give them more money. Maybe that needs to happen to some extent, but I think, anyway, that's my solution, and I don't know what you say about that.
Well, our constituency has changed in this state. The notion that this is 24 years since passage has had a powerful influence on the willingness of legislators. Republicans even were able, there was one who voted in favor of putting this on the ballot, and his argument was, this has been a quarter of a century, and we need to let people, this generation, express their views. At first blush, you might agree with that, but the Constitution is older than 24 years, and we don't come along and try to overturn the Constitution because of that. And the principles are the same. The principle is, what is your relationship with the government? And they're supposed to treat you as an equal. So, but right now, we're at a point, and I don't know whether it's because of sanctuary laws or whatever, but the constituency of this state is different from what it was in 1996. In the nation, it's different. There was a time when you could just appeal to common sense, the self-evident truths. That's what common sense is, as the basis for a proposed policy. But now we have people who are saying, look at the disparities, look at the results. And they buy into the off-stated words of Senator Bernie Sanders, who said he was going to transform America. Well, transform from what to what? And the views of the people are different. And there is a strong segment of Americans who look at the fact that there are people who are not doing as well in our society, and they want to throw out the whole system. They don't like capitalism. They don't like the concept of merit. They don't like that. And so they want to throw it out altogether. That's what the fight really is about. Do we want colorblind policies based on merit, or do we want the government picking winners and losers in this society? That's what this is really about.
Yeah, and they'll ultimately fall victim to those bad policies. I mean, eventually, not everyone can stay in power forever. So I don't know why they don't understand that that's the wrong way. Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling 479-1080, Zach. Appreciate it. Our next caller is Richard in Monterey, who has a question for Ward. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Ward. I actually live in Washington State. I just happen to be in Monterey working on my mom's house. So I grew up in Monterey, but lived in Washington since 1972. So you mentioned something about our experience with affirmative action up there. And I'm trying to remember, but I started at the University of Washington Law School in 1972. And I seem to recollect there was a case of someone who had applied for admission to the law school in like 71 or 70 and was denied based on affirmative action and filed a lawsuit, which I think went all the way up to...
I think that was the U.S. Supreme Court. Alan Bakke decision for medical school.
That's the one I'm thinking of. No, that was not medical school. I think it was law school. Well, I could be wrong about that. I wasn't thinking too much about this subject this morning until I turned on the radio, and I didn't even know about this proposition. But
that's the problem.
I'm wondering how yeah, exactly. Well, I live in Washington State, but and you mentioned that the legislature just got rid of it because it wasn't embedded in the state constitution. It was just a law, probably a proposition or something. Yeah, and it was overturned.
The legislature's actions.
So, but I'm wondering, is affirmative action constitutional? Has there been any determinative ruling on that, either with the California State Supreme Court or the federal courts?
Yes, the Supreme Court of the United States has taken this up at least twice, and each time they narrow the use of race. The most recent decision was in 2003, and it was a split decision, of course, and it turned the stomach of Justice Thomas, who felt that the court was fudging on this, to use his words, and they ruled that you could use race under rules of strict scrutiny, and the circumstance had to be compelling, and race could only be one of many factors. Well, the Washington State legislature crafted this very complex language which said you could use race along with other things, and they wanted to restore the ability to engage in affirmative action. If anyone has ever lived in America, you know that the idea of race as one of many factors is a bunch of baloney. When you're using race, it is the factor. And that was the primary reason that we took on that I-1000 bill that the Washington legislature passed. The court has gotten us into this position. They have sanctioned the use of race for the purpose of diversity, and Sandra Day O'Connor, in her departing words, said that she hoped that this would no longer be necessary in 25 years. Well, that was in 2003. So my calendar tells me that by 2028, the court should be positioned to overturn this. But I'll bet you that something will come along and they will reaffirm the use of race as one of many factors. And so I think that the decision really will depend on the presidency. Remember now, affirmative action was created not by an act of the Congress, it was created by an executive order. And how do you get rid of an executive order? A new executive order.
Well, I'm just going to leave you with one thought. I went to college in Chicago, and one of my fraternity brothers substitute taught in Chicago public schools. And so we heard all these stories about what it was like. And, of course, just having gotten out of high school in Monterey, I was absolutely shocked that it was like the blackboard jungle, you know. It's a physical warfare, you know. So, in my opinion, for people to succeed in college, it starts at the grade school level, and the schools, I think the public schools in a lot of places, and I'm not an expert on this, okay, but from what I've seen, and both my parents were teachers, so, you know, I've heard a little bit about it, but I don't think just throwing money at public schools is going to change the quality of the education. I think there has to be a more fundamental change. And, you know, my mother was English, and she was very strict in the classroom. Over here, you couldn't, what I'm told by teachers that I've spoken to is you can't do that anymore. You can't be strict. You can't throw a student out of the classroom. And that's, you know, here. I mean, I'm not talking about Chicago, which, of course, is probably 100 times worse. So I think the concept of school choice, of letting parents take their share of the tax money and put their kid in a private school, I think would be and particularly at the grade school level, I think would go a long way to solving the whole problem rather than waiting until people are trying to get in college. You know,
that's another topic. Hey, Richard, thanks.
I know
for
it's another
calling.
topic, but
yeah,
thank you.
We really want to. We got to try to get everybody on who wants to. Here's Wendell in Reno. Wendell, you're on the air on KSCO with Ward.
Real honor to speak to Ward Connerly.
Speak into the microphone, Wendell. Hard to hear you a little bit.
It's a real honor to speak to Ward Connerly.
Got it.
I
Good.
think he was one of the best regents we've ever had. I just have one really super fast question. Mr. Connerly, can you tell me what you like best about Idaho?
I like best, Wendell, the fact that I was an individual. In Idaho, they're not preoccupied with race and diversity. I was not a representative of the, quote, black race. I was just Ward Connerly, a fellow citizen. And I could go someplace and not have the word diversity shoved in my face every step of the way. People in Idaho love liberty. We're losing that in California. We're losing it. With a stroke of the pen, a governor can shut down our whole state just with a stroke of the pen. And that concerns me, and I love the individuality that Idaho affords. I may go back, I must admit.
Good answer. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for being on the air.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Wendell.
You know, there's another thing that he brought up that I want to underscore. I said earlier that our society has changed. It has. The thing that struck me the other day, I watched on one program where one of the people who was protesting, rioting actually, said that there's nothing wrong with people taking a Gucci bag from a store because they might be hungry. And she exonerated that conduct on the basis of the need. Our society is based on morals, based on principles. Those principles undergird our society. And we've reached the point that we're more preoccupied with the disparities, the fact that 15% of whatever group may not be getting into Berkeley, and we're letting that guide our decision-making rather than justifying the overarching framework. And that's what this is really about. What kind of structure do we want for our society?
Okay. Let's go to Jim and Marina. Jim, you're on the air with Ward Connerly and MZ.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. You know, I was born and raised in Idaho, and I have to agree with you. It's hard country, and you know, actually throughout history there have been a lot of African Americans who've made a big impression on this area. You know, going all the way back to the rendezvous days, and but anyway, the question that I have is, do you have any influence on the way that the proposition will be worded on the ballot?
No, we've lost that battle. The Attorney General, who I suspect sees himself as a U.S. Senator from California, who is a member of the Latino caucus, which has opposed 209 from the day that it passed, is the one who decides what the ballot label and title will be. And he wrote in that title that which the voters will see when they go to the ballot pamphlet, that Prop 16 allows diversity. We challenged that. We sued 2 weeks ago on that language, and we lost. The court did not even consider it. They said because the precedent had already been set that the Attorney General is the one that writes the ballot title, not the court. And so they wouldn't even consider our lawsuit. But you are absolutely right that this is critical, can be as much as, according to the pollsters, as much as 20% of the vote in an election. But we lost it.
Do you know how it will be worded? So, for example, if I go on Twitter and I want to argue that the wording on the ballot does not represent the proposition accurately, is there any place that I can find out what the wording of the proposition will, or the description of the proposition will be?
Go to the California Secretary of State website, track it down there. If you don't have any success there, contact, and you can do this on Twitter or whatever, Californians for Equal Rights, which is an organization that has been formed, and I have foolishly agreed to be the president, and we'll make sure you get that information.
Okay, California for Equal Rights?
Californians for Equal Rights, and I hereby anoint you as a member.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim and Marina. Here's Alan in Pacific Grove. Go ahead, Alan, you're on.
Hey, Michael. I had an interesting conversation with a parent once. I was teaching at golf, and we got into affirmative action, and he was all upset because he was really qualified for this job up at UCSC, and he claims that they wouldn't hire him because he wasn't female or homosexual, probably black too. And so what he did, he said he did a real heavy study into where affirmative action came from. And he claims that if you look in the congressional records, affirmative action was developed so that white people couldn't get jobs and they had to go in the military. Because that was a time when it was really hard. Nobody wanted to be in the military, Vietnam and all that. And so he said that prevented them from getting jobs, and so they had to go in the military. I was wondering if you guys knew anything about that or ever heard of anything about that.
I've heard of that theory. I don't agree with that theory. I think that affirmative action originated in 1961 by executive order issued by the late President John F. Kennedy. And as I said, it was designed to ensure non-discrimination, and it said without regard to race, etc. After his assassination, President Johnson was lobbied by Dr. King to make it a more effective policy, effective in quotes, and he prevailed upon President Johnson to issue a new executive order, 11246, number 11246, that put some teeth into affirmative action and empowered agencies to establish goals and timetables and to look at the results. And in my view, 11246 as a means of bringing black people into the mainstream of American life is about as useless now as two heads on my part.
Yeah.
And it needs to be ended. Congress never voted on this. It's all done by one person, by the president at that time, and it has outlived its usefulness.
Yeah.
Alan, thanks for calling into the Saturday special. Here's Tom in Aptos. Tom, you're on the air on KSCO.
Thank you for the program, and Mr. Connerly, it's an honor to speak to you. Real quick, I know we're short for time, but what I tell my Oriental friends or Asians that they refer to, but Oriental is a much more descriptive term and more accurate. But I tell them and their kids, when they go into the UC system, if this passes, It's going to make their degrees. It's going to cheapen their degrees. And when they find out that they went through a UC system, they say, "Oh, did you get in on affirmative action?" They won't even talk about the merits. And so this is just another argument that maybe people could use. And again, I give my friends that, this is what's going to happen with their degrees. I mean, what's the purpose of that? There's going to be no merit, like you mentioned. And again, I'm sorry, I probably tuned in a little late, but you probably mentioned a lot of things, with Harvard and Yale discriminating against Orientals, Asian Americans. It's well documented. And Asian Americans are now the new white people, apparently. You never read about that, with Black Lives Matter, or they talk about black and brown people, but they never talk about, yellow people. So I just wanted to throw that in. And again, it was an honor to speak to you, and thank you for championing this again. It's a travesty that we even have to go over this again. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, looks like we're going to get our last caller here, Nick and Royal Oaks. Don't have a whole lot of time, Nick, but go ahead.
Thank you very much for affirmative action. And as a new minority, why I was happy to see it dissolved. On Hometown Heroes last week, you'll hear a 95-year-old Air Corps veteran explain that they did not want black officers. And what happened, Cap, they had 19 into study. They give them 18 hours of training. They only gave them 9 hours because they did not want them to fail. Those guys went into their barracks, closed the blinders, and studied and 13 of them passed. But now, when we get people with a free pass, we get fibbers like Condoleezza Rice and all the dead bodies behind her, and people like Cam Harris, who's only thinking about she can start working now. So,
wow.
It's a
Wish we had more time, but we're at the end of the show. Nick, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. And Ward, wow, we got to get you on again. We want to do everything we can to help get the word out about Prop 16. And thank you very much for being with us and all the success we wish to you.
Thank you very much. If you can get your audience to go to that website, Californians for Equal Rights, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll have you on again. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
That's all, folks.
KSCO.